Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we're taking a look at some classic sports cars. We kick things off with the 1965 Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA Stradale. That's a lot of words. 115 horsepower, 105 foot-pounds torque, 1,676 pounds of weight. This is, as you can probably tell by that, an incredibly light vehicle. In fact, it's the second lightest car here today, only being beaten out by something that you will see later on. The Alfa Romeo Giulia, probably not one of my favourites of the Alfa Romeos. I much prefer the brand new Giulia that they've just bought out, of course, the Quadrifoglio with its 506 horsepower and all the rest of it. This one, no way near as quick as that, of course. 115 horsepower, 105 foot-pound torque, but back in its day, I'm sure this was quite the little pocket rocket. And to drive, it is actually a really nice car. It doesn't feel as light as you'd expect it to. The other car that we've got that sort of is around this weight today, that does feel very light. Again, I'll get onto that shortly, but this one, it doesn't feel particularly light, but it is a nice driving car. It doesn't have nowhere near the amount of differential problems that some of the later cars that we're going to be driving today do. The suspension is very wallowy. It does like to go sideways quite often. Really could do with a rear wing, but this is one of those cars which I'm sure people do overlook, but with a couple of modifications, I'm sure this thing could actually be a rather excellent low-class race car, you know, C-Class, B-Class maybe. This thing could be pretty darn phenomenal, if you ask me. Yeah, a car which I actually kind of enjoyed driving, and yeah, it was certainly one of the quicker cars here today in terms of speed, as it gets very sideways through the final corner. Next up, not so nice to drive, was the 1967 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL. 180 horsepower, 193 foot-pounds torque, 3,120 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful and most torquey car here today. In fact, it's the most torquey by quite a ways away. However, it is by far the heaviest car here today. It is the only car here today to weigh more than 3,000 pounds. In fact, the next lightest car is about 500 pounds lighter than this. So yeah, then again, I mean, calling this car a sports car, it isn't quite a sports car, it's more of a tourer, I guess you'd call. Maybe there's sort of crossovers between Grand Tourer and sports car. Personally, this is probably my favourite generation of the Mercedes SL. Not really a huge fan of Mercedes or the SLs in particular, you know, the Roadsters, they're just not really my thing. But, you know, this is of course a timeless, well, I say timeless, it's a very of-the-time car, but it's a very pretty car, certainly, and it does have a rather nice dashboard, but to drive, it is odd. It drives half like a sports car and half like a barge. You can feel the weight in this. This, again, by far the heaviest car here today, and it feels like the heaviest car here today. It does have some sports car characteristics, you know, it isn't that wallowy on the suspension and so on and so forth, but just the turning on it's quite heavy. It likes to go sideways. It doesn't really feel like you can save it. It almost drives like half an American muscle car, really. Very strange car to drive, this one. I wouldn't particularly recommend it if I was you, but you know, of course it does have very pretty look, so maybe that's why you want to drive it. Next up, 1969 Datsun 240Z, 160 horsepower, 138 foot-pounds torque, 2,308 pounds of weight. Of course, elsewhere in the world, it's known as the Nissan Fairlady Z. I call it the Datsun 240Z because that's what I know it as, so there you go. Anyways, the Datsun 240Z, probably one of my more favourite cars here today. I do like the 240Z, I think it's a very good looking car, even though it does really borrow from the Alfa Romeo Spider and the Jaguar E-Type. It's a nice looking car. It has pretty impressive figures, especially for a car of its day. It is rather impressive, you know, 160 horsepower. Today you get that in, you know, most normal cars, but back here, you know, in this sports car, considering its weight and everything, I'm sure this is still a relatively quick car, even to this day. As it goes to drive, well, it only further validated my liking of this car. It is a surprisingly fun car to drive, to sort of just chuck around, chuck it into the corners. It will grip, it does like to go sideways every now and again, but that sort of adds to the fun almost, I guess. It's nowhere near as wallowy as a car from this age you'd sort of expect. There is a bit of wallow to it, but not a ridiculous amount. It's also pretty fast in a straight line, probably one of the more quick cars in a straight line here today, just as account to the power to weight ratio being a lot better than most of the cars here today. But yeah, it is a very solid, nice car to drive. Certainly one that I could envision myself driving a couple more times in its current stock form. Next up, the 1971 Lotus Elan Sprint, 126 horsepower, 113 foot-pound torque, 1,640 pounds of weight. This is the car I was referring to when I was talking about the Alfa, the other car being the lightest. This is the lightest car here today by, yeah, it's incredibly tiny. This is by far and away the smallest car here today. I'm not actually sure, I've never seen a Lotus Elan in real life. I've seen a Mini Marcos in real life. They are very, very tiny. I imagine a Mini Marcos and this are around the same size as each other. Yeah, the Elan is incredibly small. As far as this one goes to drive, honestly, it is a bit of a letdown. You can sort of see it through that corner. You saw a lot of smoke coming from the rear wheels. Yeah, the differential on this thing is very open. It's sort of you turn in, put the power down, and you just get smoke. You don't really get a whole lot of movement in any particularly good way. You can sort of see the right tyre there getting completely smoked to death. Yeah, the Elan just not a great handling car, unfortunately. I mean, if you put a differential in this thing, maybe gave it some wider tyres to put a bit more power into it, I'm sure you could make a pretty good car. As far as, you know, its sort of straight line speed's concerned, this might actually be the quickest car here today. You know, sort of I said Datsun was fast. This might beat it, just as account for having possibly the best power to weight ratio here today. But yeah, it's just not a fun car to drive through the corners, unfortunately, which is really what you'd expect the Elan to be. Not a straight line speed car, but more of a handling car. Next up, the 1972 Volvo 1800E, 130 horsepower, 130 foot-pound torque, 2,706 pounds of weight. If you're going to ask me for my personal favourite car here today based on looks and so on and so forth, I'm going to say it is the Volvo 1800E. This is a very pretty car to look at, and of course it is a Volvo, which is fantastic. I believe this was Volvo's first ever sports car, and one of the only Volvo true pedigree sports cars to become a thing. There is actually a station wagon version of this as well, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately in Forza we have to deal with the standard coupe, but I believe they did a wagon. There may have been a roadster as well. You might have to correct me if I'm wrong on that one. You can sort of hear the engine, it sounds very old school, especially when it was getting off the line, sort of sputtering and clattering away. Yeah, this is not a quick car, in all honesty. It is rather slow. After driving the Lotus Elan, you know, the Elan was fairly quick getting up to 60. It sort of started struggling around 70 and 80. This really struggles to get momentum going. You can sort of see going around the track, it's not a quick car. Now, saying that, it's a very decent handling car, and again, similar to the Alfa Romeo from earlier, if you want a low-class race car, that's a little bit different. I'd probably recommend checking out the Volvo 1800E. You can probably do something pretty incredible with this. You know, unfortunately autocross isn't open yet, but if you wanted an autocrossing car, I can imagine the 1800E would be quite ideal. But as it stands, just not a quick car from stock. It definitely needs that engine swapping out with something a little bit more powerful, or maybe giving more power. You know, either way, whichever way you want to do it, whether you want to be a purist or to irritate the purists. Anyways, next up, 1972 Mazda Cosmo 110S, 128 horsepower, 103 foot-pound torque, 2,110 pounds of weight, which is interesting when you consider the car's called the 110S. This is the least torquey car here today, as you'd probably expect, because it is, of course, powered by a rotary engine. This is the only rotary car here today, and yeah, I do actually like the Mazda Cosmo. A lot of people say this car looks weird. I kind of get where they're coming from. Personally, I actually quite like the look of it. I think from the front it looks excellent. From the back it's a little bit 1960s American land yacht. But yeah, it's a nice looking car, personally, if you ask me. I do like the Cosmo. Of course, it makes fantastic noises all good rotaries should make. Very loud. Probably the loudest car here today, in all honesty. As far as it goes to drive, the Cosmo's a lot more nimble than I expected it to be. I don't know if that's just me saying it because I came from the Volvo, which obviously was quite a sort of slow, heavy car, but, you know, in terms of between this and the Volvo, there's not actually that much in it. I believe there's less than 10 PI between the Volvo and the Cosmo, and the Cosmo feels like a much more energetic car. Whether it's better handling or I think this one had some slight more diff problems. It doesn't get through the corners quite as nicely as the Volvo does, but it is quicker than the Volvo, so it is taking more speed through the corners because it can get to the corners quicker, you know, especially through sort of the follow through in these last couple of corners. Straight line speed does count, and the Cosmo does have that edge over the Volvo, but it's still not a quick car. by any means. Next up, the 1980 Fiat 124 Sports Spider, 102 horsepower, 110 foot-pounds, up to 3,310 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today. Yeah, the Fiat 124 Sports Spider, of course, this car was recently resurrected, even if it is just a rebadged, rebodied, and different engined MX-5, but yeah, the new one is still quite cool. I like the 124, I believe I've done a build on this before, and it actually turned out to be a fairly decent car when you sort of build it up to like B-class. It's a very good looking car as well. It looks better once you get rid of the stupid American bumpers on it, but yeah, despite that, the 124 is still a car that I do rather like, and of course, as you know, if you spent any time on this channel, I am a huge Fiat fanboy. As far as this one goes to drive, I can't. It's slow. It is agonizingly slow. This is way slower than that Volvo was. The Volvo, it's not a quick car, but it doesn't really bore you coming down the straights. This thing, man, just coming down these straights, it feels so agonizingly slow. The Mini Cooper honestly feels faster than this thing, and it's just because it hasn't got enough power. 102 horsepower in 1980. It's just not enough. This thing realistically feels like it should have about 150 horsepower. With 150 horsepower, this thing could be very competitive, but as far as it just stands, you know, it's not great. It is a very decent handling car. You could sort of see body rolls minimal. Differential on this one actually behaves itself as well, which is nice, but yeah, the 124 just not quick, unfortunately. And finally today, the 1986 Alfa Romeo GTV 6. We go back to Alfa Romeo. 155 horsepower, 157 foot-pound torque, 2,840 pounds of weight. As far as cars here today, this one probably has the most modern stats of all of them. Those are the sort of stats you'd probably see connected to, I don't know, like a Ford Fiesta or something like that. The Fiesta with a better engine, admittedly, because the furthest they go up to is 140 horsepower with the EcoBoost, but never mind. The GTV6, of course, most modern car here today in 1986. I was sort of using classic I-Class as anything over 30 years old, just when I'm sort of sorting these episodes. I know everyone has different sort of definitions of what a classic car is, what a retro car is, and so on and so forth. You'll find out how I did retro cars in the next episode, but yeah, as far as these classic cars go, there's different definitions, but this in my mind is a classic car now, and yeah, it's pretty old. I mean, it's over 30 years old. As far as this one goes to drive, it's okay. It's definitely one of the quicker cars here today, sort of straight line performance and so on and so forth. Does have a lot of issues with its differential. The diff is open on this one, unlike the fantastic Giulia from earlier, which didn't have so many issues. This does have issues with its differential, but again, it is quicker. There's sort of a make-up for that. I do like the GTV6. It's a good-looking car. Me personally, I do prefer sort of the Alfa Romeo Spider and the Alfa Romeo SZ sort of from this era, but the GTV6 is still a pretty cool car, and it does make a great noise. In fact, it might be one of the only 6-cylinders here today. Anyways, going on to the leaderboard, and well, there's a lot of cars in one section of this board because we sort of filled out the 135s to 140 board. First up today, the quickest car was the Datsun 240Z with 135.140, taking it into 149th place. In 150th place, we find the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint GTA Stradale with a 135.230. Interestingly, the oldest car here today, being the second quickest car, actually beats out a Nissan 240SX as well, which is pretty interesting. So does the 240, that's very interesting. In 153rd place, we find the Lotus Elan Sprint with a 135.490, just a little bit quicker than the Porsche 914-6, which had gone around in episode 2, I believe, which is a pretty interesting comparison. In 155th place, we find the Alfa Romeo GTV 6 with a 135.704, and in 156th place, we find the Mercedes-Benz 280SL with 136.463. Moving down the board some more, we find the other cars. In 158th place, the Mazda Cosmo 110S with 138.760, about a second and a half off of a Escort RS 1800. In 159th place, we find the Volvo 1800e with 149.753. And finally today, in 160th place, we find the Fiat 124 Sports Spider with 141.063. The lack of power, of course, hurting the Fiat, but all these cars are relatively well contained. They're only about 6 seconds away from each other. Most of these cars are E-Class cars, and well, we've filled out that sort of portion of the board at the bottom because there was a lot of gap there, but now there's less gap there, which makes me happy. Anyways, I want to thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps, and I do want to apologise that this episode did take so long to come out. I've just been a little bit unmotivated as of lately, which is probably telling in the channel's content, but don't worry, hopefully my passion comes back shortly. It's starting to feel like it is. Next episode, I'm going to be taking a look at retro sports cars, so join me for that. Until then, thank you all very much for watching, and farewell.